This is another edition of Eddie G's Music World. We are at the date of January 22nd, 2019. And yes, it's visual. I listened to the Grigster because the man has graduated from University of Radio, maybe. He does a great show. He said, close those doors behind you. It looks better. And get some plastic surgery for your face. Well, I could only listen to his first recommendation. I did close the doors behind me, and I'm actually on camera. I was on camera last week with the great John Magnuson, a musician, and had a nice little interview with him, learned about him. Hopefully he has a good career. Hopefully he'll contact me once in a while. I'll call him here and there. We'll have a little talk. I'm guessing at some point we will have another Grigster chat, maybe Creeper Freak 2. Anyone else who wants to join me, they could find me through the comments. Last week when I did the John Magnuson thing, it was on Skype. I noticed my face was making little adjustments, and I felt that it was not good. There's times where I think maybe I'm kind of like Howard Stern. Maybe I have the face for radio. But hey, I'm a little visual. Let's give it another shot. Eddie G's Music World, we're cranking out another show, and I'm happy to be doing it with you. Now, we will get a little further down the line to continuing our top 500 countdown of Rolling Stone's greatest albums. I'm sure at some other point I will be bringing another interview on. We'll do I'd love to do a picture-in-picture thing analyzing music videos, but I was told how to, given a link to learn about that, and I'm not fast with technology, so that's not happening yet. I need help to have things explained to me. And okay, so in the last week, since I was doing my last show, I noticed a little thing. Sometimes what I do is I look up rock stars. My fascination is bands that, there were guys in the band early on and they didn't keep their job. Either they quit or they were fired. And then after they left, the bands went on to huge success. There's a lot of them out there, but I'm going to talk about three of them. Three different bands where that happened. First one, Skid Row. I had heard stories about this, that Sebastian Bach kind of was, whisked in and he got the job, and of course he's a great vocalist. I saw him live twice with Skid Row and by himself. But in addition, I didn't realize until about 6 or 8 months ago that Matt Fallon was the first singer for Skid Row. He had done demos with them. They're on the computer. They're out there. And he did a pretty reasonable job. It was basically all the first album and maybe a little more. 12 songs, 8, 9, 10 songs, I'm not sure. But the Youth Gone Wild and 18 in Life were on it. So the style was done by Matt Fallon. He established the style, the vocal style. For whatever reason, he quit or he got kicked out. I think he might have gotten kicked out. And of course, Sebastian Bach comes in. He has a much better voice, much better range, more emotion. So I'm not saying that's a mistake to get Sebastian Bach in. Not at all. I feel a little bit bad for this guy, Matt Fallon. I looked him up. I tried to track him down because some of these people are accessible, but I couldn't find Matt Fallon on Twitter, which is my method of tracking down people. Usually I go through Twitter. I'm not a Facebook guy at all. And so the reality is, I want to make sure my volume is on. Hey, listen, I see people on live television with 100,000 viewers check their volume and stuff like that. So I may not be the most professional, but checking stuff like that is not too bad. Anyway, so this guy was replaced by Bach and went on. And of course, he did little things here and there, but he never did quite capture the public eye in any band that he was in after or any records. I even saw that he came up with a record like 3 years ago. But I mean, I doubt if it sold more than a few hundred copies. He's not known, and he never did break out of the obscurity after he left Skid Row. So that's one main one. Another two that caught my eye, and I looked them up. on Twitter, and they actually both replied to me, which is rare because a lot of these one-time or former rock stars or rock stars that are still popular and singing and working, they don't, a lot of them, they just don't want to be bothered by people like me, casual fans, curious guys type of stuff. Okay, so the next one was Neil Turbin. He was the first singer of Anthrax. And I found that out by listening to another show that was on the air that talked about him, talked about the fact that Anthrax was, someone else was in there before Joey Bonarosa, or no, that's not, Belladonna took over. His name was Neil Turbin. He was in there. I mean, if you go on YouTube, you will find in 1982 Anthrax recording live, and he sang pretty good too. And again, not sure. I think he did quit on his own, and just, at the time, 1982, you could be sure Anthrax wasn't massively successful, and they were probably a popular band, but they hadn't broken through in a major way yet. So he left, and he's doing stuff. He answered me. I told him I liked his work on musically and vocally and everything, and he replied something pleasant to me. He is now in a band called He has been in a band called Onslaught. I'm not sure if he currently still is in that band. Now he's in a band called the Death Rider. So he was nice enough to talk to me about it and saying what he's up to. I think I mentioned that if he comes to Montreal, that maybe I will go see him live if he's in a band. I mean, I'm not saying I will or won't. I could. I don't think he's coming just for me. He's going to have to come to a club that, these club makers, these club owners have a good feeling that, you're going to bring 500 people to the club, or he's not going to, his band won't be able to come here for like 50 people. I'm pretty sure there's no money in it for them. So he was nice enough to reply to me. And another guy who was interviewed, and that caught my attention. He was interviewed on the radio about maybe a week or 10 days ago. Let me refresh my memory. His name is Tim Ripper Owens. Now, if you remember metal music in the mid-90s, the singer of Judas Priest left, the original singer, or not the actual original one, but the main one, Rob Halford. He left, and they brought in this person, Tim Ripper Owens. And I tweeted to him after I heard about this. He's in a bunch of bands, and he had said he got heckled a lot and didn't get a lot of respect by a few people, but some people liked his singing in Judas Priest, and some were kind of like flipping him off because he was not Rob Halford, and his voice is great. I mean, I've heard him because I looked him up and I heard him. So he replied to me. He was kind enough to discuss different things. I think I mentioned that one of his current bands is Charred Wall of the Damned, and the great Richard Christie from the Howard Stern Show is the drummer. So he did reply to that and mentioned, yeah, Richard, this and that. I mean, he just replied. It wasn't anything incredibly exciting. It was something just to acknowledge my tweet to him. So he was in the original, not the original, he was a replacement for Rob Halford. And now he's been in Charred Walls of the Damned and New Spirits of Fire. So these guys, I don't know how they balance two bands. I can barely do one radio show once a week. So it's funny. It's kind of interesting to track these guys down that had kind of like flirting with massive success, but never became like this this big rock star that that there people like Rob Halford were. But he's still around. Tim Ripper Owens, and he still tours, does music. So I thought I'd relate that story to all of you. Sorry if I adjust the mic. I'm trying to get used to what sounds good and what doesn't. And it's not until after the show that I can tell that it sounded good or not. But I'd like to at least give you a good experience. So anyway, those are the three things that I wanted to discuss. And, well, at this point, we are going to go back and have a little taste of what I was doing 2-3 weeks ago, which is counting down the top 500 Rolling Stones saw albums, and the last time we spoke about it, I had just finished the review of the Smokey Robinson and the Miracle album, Going to a Go-Go. So next on the list is 272, Sleater-Kinney, Dig Me Out. I'm pretty sure there's not much over about this group that I can talk about. I see that they had a folky style and they were popular, but I don't really have a lot more insight to discuss with you concerning this album. So if anybody has a comment about a band that I don't know much about, I mean, I'm happy to get feedback on it. Number 271 is the Beach Boys Today. There's, of course, songs on here that are well known, like Dance, 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 When I Grew Up to Be a Man. I mean, they were a hit machine back then, so I mean, all it is one after the other. In the mid '60s, they were churning out top 40 songs, and later on, of course, got more experimental. And now they're an oldies act, like just about everybody else from those years. And next is a band that is kind of could be an oldies act, but because they still tour in their mid 70s, most of them, they're still considered vibrant. The Rolling Stones, Some Girls, at number 270 on Eddie G's Music World on the 22nd of January 2019. I remember this coming out, being a really amazing album. Got played constantly. Miss You. I'm Just Waiting on a Friend. Shattered. I was in LA at the time, walking around with my tiny little gold-colored transistor radio, about the size of a cell phone. This was about 3 years before the Walkmans seemed to come out, so I didn't have any sophisticated equipment to walk around with. But a landmark album for sure. Not too many bands. I mean, people talk about the Beatles being this brilliant band, which they were, but keep in mind, Rolling Stones started around 64, and this is 78, and they were still vibrant. The Beatles packed it in their 9th year about. So you can say anything you want about them, but they didn't continue long enough. They did do enough in that 9-year period, or 10 years, to be considered brilliant, not questioning their talent, but they didn't test themselves over time because they broke up and went their separate way. The Rolling Stones had enough staying power to, despite the fact that Keith and Mick probably didn't get along much, they knew that they needed each other to keep the system churning out hits and music and tours. So I'm not saying one was right, one was wrong, but that's just the reality. Number 269, Jesus and Mary Chain. Their album was Psycho Candy. I did see this group live at the Metropolis Club in Montreal. And kind of a cosmic band. The song like Just Like Honey was played. A few other ones from that era. I do remember not much more than that about the group. They were, I think, they're from England, and I knew enough about them and liked them enough that I decided to experience them live back then. I don't go to too many shows anymore. Number 268 is Paul Simon's album. He called it Paul Simon. I guess since he did so many Simon and Garfunkel albums, he wanted to distinguish himself that he wasn't doing this album with Garfunkel, although they did reunite a few times over the years after that. One of the hit songs off there, Mother and Child Reunion, I think that was something to do with chicken and eggs, because the mother was the chicken and the eggs was the child. I mean, it's not all that profound, but look, he did pretty good. I remember one of my first albums, the first singles that I bought was Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard, and that's on this album. So that was something that I was a big fan of Paul Simon's. At least it was played a lot on the radio. So I did buy that, one of my first songs that I did buy. And let's continue down the list and see what other gems are waiting for us. The Who, which was the album Quadrophenia, where I saw the entire album played back to front with Zach Starkey, which is Ringo's son, and he did a great job filling in for Kenny Jones, and before him, of course, Keith Moon. And interesting enough, I think it was Keith Moon that trained Zak Starkey, or yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the case. So he learned from Keith Moon, Zak Starkey, and he was great at the job. And was was alive back then in 1996 when I saw that show, and it was quite sad that he did pass 4 or 5 years later, around 2002. But I was quite impressed with the Quadrophenia show. I haven't seen the Who since then. I hear they're coming with a full orchestra. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm a full orchestra kind of guy. Not sure. Like bands like Kiss have done this, and the Who's trying it. Do you really want to hear violins churning when you hear "Won't Get Fooled Again"? I don't know. Maybe some people do. It's quite possible, but for me, I'm gonna have to make a late decision on that show. Next on the list, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Child is Father to the Man. This was Al Kooper, when Al Kooper was in the band, before Blood, Sweat, and Tears became the singles band that they turned out about 6-7 hits, like When I Die. This they were around for this album, which more bluesy, didn't have really massive hits with anything, but I Can't Quit Her, I think, was on this, and I Love You More Than You'll Ever Know was on this, and Al Kooper, I think, played piano for Dylan, like a Rolling Stone or one of those songs. And so he left, and David Clinton Thomas came around and brought the band to much greater heights. And they don't know what's happening with them. Probably not much at this point. And okay, let's see what's next at 265 on the list of the top 500 albums from Rolling Stones. Ray Charles, the genius of Ray Charles. Will not dispute the genius of Ray Charles. I'm sure he was. The term is thrown around quite a bit. And, to have come up with all those popular songs, written, played, etc. Blind, we all know that's pretty impressive. We've seen it with Stevie Wonder as well. And these guys, Rolling Stone, consider it brilliant. So from 1959, this thing came out. We go next to a band that seems to be on this list quite a bit. I've looked ahead a bit, so I know it's Grateful Dead, Working Man's Dead. Again, whenever I get to one of the Grateful Dead albums, I will not have a massive amount of information to discuss. They're not a band that got played a lot where I live. I've picked up on 3 or 4 songs like Shades of Grey and Wasted on the Way and Davy Jones, whatever that song was, I don't know. So okay, they had that following, the T-shirts, the sweatshirts, the dope smoking, the touring. Jerry Garcia passed away, and all the fights over his money with all these kids and whatever. But I'm not going to have much more to say about Grateful Dead. Here's a girl, Tracy Chapman, with her album Tracy Chapman next, number 263. She was definitely a force for a while. I remember in the late 80s, this girl came out, and she, was a big deal, Fast Cars, and that was a big album. Then she had another song or two over the next 3 years, and she is definitely one of the big folky type of emotional singers from those years, and still to this day she does do shows. I think she's part of the LGBTQA community, and those people are pretty faithful and loyal, and they still go to concerts for her and other people that aren't part of that community, I'm sure. I sniffed again. Sorry about that. Crosby, Stills, and Nash. They came up with the title Crosby, Stills, and Nash 2. So the album was named after the band. They were praised by Jimi Hendrix, had a song called Sweet Judy Blue Eyes, Marrakesh Express on there. I know that Judy Collins was dating one of these 3 guys. I'm going to go with Stephen Stills, but it's a little foggy. So that's how they came up with Sweet Judy Blue Eyes, was for Judy Collins. And if you're ever on Twitter, you might get David Crosby to reply. I mean, I've tweeted him about 10 times. He replied 2 or 3 times. So I don't know. Come up with a good question, and you have a little chance to hear from the guy, if that's something you care about. Obviously, I do. I went so far as to, this is going off the grid a bit with the talk, but in 1989, I lost $500 on a field goal kick, because if the field goal kicker would have made it, I would have made $500. But he missed it. It went off the upright, and it cost me $500. And I was actually at the game. I drove to Boston. I went to Foxborough in 1989 and watched myself lose $500. So what I did was I found the kicker on Twitter. I gave him a tweet kind of saying, look, you cost me $500 in 1989. I told him the game, the year, everything. But I said to him, I'm over it. I just want to wish the Rams good luck, because, of course, they're in the Super Bowl in a couple of weeks playing the Patriots. He didn't answer. He's a dormant account. He hasn't tweeted since 2016. I found out after I made my tweet to him. So, whatever he's doing in his life, he's not sitting there worried about some guy like me. Okay, back on track. Here is the next item on your list for The Price is Right. No. Grateful Dead again, American Beauty. I told you they'd be showing up. I was right. They're back again with another album. It's called American Beauty. The only thing I know about American Beauty is it was a movie with Kevin Spacey. Other than that, I know they have a song called Friend of the Devil on this, which I think I've heard a little bit. So I won't have much more to say than that. We are up to number 260, Willie Nelson with his album Stardust. This is from 1978, so this is when he was like, he's been around since the early 60s in, singing, writing. He wrote Crazy for Patty, I forget her name. Anyway, and he never broke out into this massive star type of thing, but around this time, a little after this, started doing For All the Girls I Loved Before, On the Road Again. So he started to become more mainstream, and now I doubt if he's recording a whole lot, because he's in his 80s, and at a certain point, you got to assume these guys slow down. He had a debt to pay to the tax man, and had to tour and pay off his taxes a few years ago. Somebody who's going to be inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in the next 2-3 months is Janet Jackson, and she's next on the list with The Velvet Rope. Yes, I've talked about the fact that I met Janet Jackson. There she was in a Ralph's grocery store, being clung to by her mother, and I was like 10 yards away. I knew it was her because she was on a TV show called Good Times, and I'd been watching that show, and she was all giggly because she knew I recognized her, and she was like, her mother was stressed out because she sees me looking at the kid, and I was 18, the kid was probably 10, and I just thought, I'll leave this kid alone. The mother looks like neurotic about the whole situation. So I didn't ask for an autograph, and I let her out. I don't know if I would have gotten one. The mother might have said, leave my kid alone, or something like that. But, her music is pretty good. She's not just Michael's sister. She's talented. She's got a good voice. A lot of her music was catchy, popular songs, too. So I'm glad she's getting in the Hall of Fame. Another person I met was Ray Davies. He's on the list with the Kinks on number 258. The Village Green Preservation Society. I did meet Ray and had a 12-second talk with the guy. He came to Montreal and did a solo show. There's talk of the Kinks getting back together because at a tour, maybe that could end up happening, but I don't really know where they're going or when the tour starts or if there's a new album coming out. I just know there was talk that the Kinks might be back. The Kinks are a band that had two different types of periods. One was like a lot of hits. You Really Got Me, All Day, All the Night, a few other ones. And then they got into a little more ethereal, more experimental, deeper albums later on, like this one, I think is one of those. And doesn't mean they faded off into the sunset, but they were critically more acclaimed with an album like this, but less hits. So I mean, it was their fate, their choice to end up in this situation, and they still had a great career despite that. So doesn't mean you're not a great band if you don't have hits. Someone who had a lot of hits is next, 257 on the list, Whitney Houston with her album Whitney Houston. I just saw a movie with her, Waiting to Exhale, where all these women, get together and complain about their boyfriends, husbands, and whatever. It was not bad. I mean, I don't know if she's considered a good actress or not, but she carried herself well in that movie. And of course, she's known for all the hits and all the drugs and all the problems. And I'm going to guess she's probably the only pop star that's had her biological daughter date her adopted son. That would be interesting to hear that actually happened somewhere else. Sadly, her daughter died, and the adopted son lost his girlfriend because she passed away. How is it that Whitney Houston and her daughter both drowned in a bathtub? That's probably the first time that a mother and daughter separately drowned in a bathtub, with the mother being a pop singer. How the hell does this happen? I'm guessing that the daughter, Bobby, I guess it was Bobby, something like that, felt depressed about her mother dying in the bathtub, so she took a bath. Could be. Either way, she's gone. It's a sad, sad time to think about these kind of things where young people die. It's pretty sad. Kraftwerk, Trans Europe Express is next at 256. And I like the song Trans Europe Express. I guess my radio station played it when they needed a long break, since it was like pretty much the whole side of an album. And I liked that song. A couple more that came out. I know they had a song called Computer Games that Coldplay, without being sued, they just made an arrangement to pay them because For All I Left Behind, or one of those songs from Coldplay, sounded just like the riff on this song called Computer Games. So sometimes it's better to get in front of a lawsuit, meaning avoid it, no lawsuit. Just deal with the fact that your song sounds like something else. Pay the band or the writers or publishers or whatever, and you won't have to deal with lawsuits later on. But bands like Led Zeppelin didn't use that technique. They used songs, or 2 or 3 songs were similar to some other people's songs, and they went and recorded, and they got sued later. I guess it saved them money in certain ways. I know it did, because in the case of Jake Holmes, Dazed and Confused, he sued the Led Zeppelin, but it was late, like around 2012. So he only got a piece of the sales from 2012 or 13 on. So all the millions and millions of dollars that song generated from 1970 or 68 or 69 until 2012, even though they took a lot of his song, he didn't get a dime for those. So he was a little slow to react. He sent Jimmy Page a letter complaining about it. Like Jimmy Page, I don't think he cared about that letter. We are coming to Metallica and their album Metallica, which Metallica is still around. This is, of course, groundbreaking music from the middle of their career. I'm wondering if they're on their way back to tour to Montreal. It'll be a show that I might not go to, since I did see them the one time. They were great, but I'm really slowing down to a crawl my concert going. I don't have anybody around that has any money, or I have another friend that does want to go that has money, but he likes to bring his wife and his kids, and then it's like over 4 tickets, and it gets complicated because he buys them and then he tells me later that he bought them. So I don't have anybody to go with concerts unless I lay out money for a friend of mine that has no money. And then I might see it when I'm like in my 80s or whatever. Next, we are up to Otis Redding, Dictionary of Soul. Another guy who died too young. He did a version of Day Tripper on this. Try Little Tenderness. So I didn't realize, but that was a Bing Crosby song. So I guess this album is more cover type of stuff. And Otis, of course, died at a young age in a plane crash, posthumously releasing a #1 hit, Sitting on the Dock of the Bay. So after he came out, they released a single, and that became a #1 song for Otis Redding. Helped his family, hopefully. Bruce Springsteen, The River. Number 253 on Eddie G's Music World for January 22nd, 2019. I guess this album is about relationships. Well, not surprising. A lot of his stuff is about his personal life and things he's going through it, or went through at the time. I did buy the album. I know it well. I liked it when it came out. Don't hear it that much. I mean, Hungry Heart, I think, is on there with Mark Bolan and forget the other guy. There's two guys from the Turtles, and they're singing background on this song. The song Hungry Heart, but it's a big album, and I think it was double album. And at the time, it was a big deal. I'm sure it still is. Next, number 252, Jay-Z with his album The Blueprint. Never was too big a fan of Jay-Z. He's got Hard Rock Life and Woman Ain't a Problem and a Bitch. 99 Problems and a Bitch Ain't One. Okay, so he's got his woman in good control, who's also a big breadwinner named Beyonce. So he's got everything under control. Good for you, Jay-Z. I'm happy you've managed to get your life in order. It's not easy. Number 251 in the top 500 from Rolling Stones magazine is Low. And apparently he went to West Berlin to get rid of his cocaine habit, and he met Brian Eno, or he started, maybe he already knew Brian Eno, and Brian Eno produced this. And of course, he had a lot of work done with Iggy Pop's solo career too. Another guy who died not that long ago, must be 2015 or 15, I'm going to say. And I saw a recent video of his where he is talking to his, he's doing a live concert about 10 years ago or so. And his daughter he has with Iman is on doing the show with him, which is nice to have your kids do a show with you. So he did that. And still revered and thought of as brilliant, and I'm sure he was. And unfortunately, I think I've told this story a couple of times that I didn't get to see him live for stupid reasons. Let's put it that way. Okay, Jay-Z, Reasonable Doubt, back-to-back Jay-Z. It's kind of a Bowie sandwich, Jay-Z on each side of a Bowie. Reasonable Doubt is the album. And again, I didn't think much or have much to say about him before, so I still don't. So let's leave him on the list. Automatic for the People was REM. Of course, REM stood for Rapid Eye Movement. Probably already knew that. REM had that huge career. REM did something that maybe U2 seems to be tinkering with, meaning you start to be around too long, you kind of ride off into the sunset, maybe U2, because they haven't faded away, although the last album was not like a massive success. Maybe they've learned to just they should learn to kind of tone it down and just get off the road. It seems like they're going to get off the road. And REM did that. They made a big pile of money, and I don't know. It seems like they drifted off into the sunset. In the background of this video, you will see a chair that's torn up by one of my sons, paper towels, my wizard collection, my white doors, my dirty carpet. I didn't want the dirty carpet, okay? When I bought this house, there were things that I didn't like about it. Carpets get dirty. Don't buy houses with carpets if you have kids. They wreck the carpet. They spill things on the carpet. They drop things on the carpet. They stain the carpet. You have to shampoo the carpet. So I'm giving you advice. If anybody out there in my huge audience is listening or looking, try not to buy a house with carpets. It's not a good idea. If you have a pet, which my kids are driving me crazy, they want a pet. They want a cat. So I played them some Cat Stevens, but it didn't seem to make them happy. And then I played them some Pussycat Dolls. They didn't like that either. They still wanted the cat. Then I played the song Catmandu by Bob Seger. I thought that would do it. Like convince them, stop bothering me with the cat. That wasn't enough. And I have one of my two kids, he's relentless. He is, I mean, as much as Trump won't stop pushing for his wall, one of these sons that I have, because I have two, will not stop bugging me about a cat. If there's a cartoon on TV about a cat or he sees the word cat, he starts pushing me again. Don't get a cat, people say, because, look, they're a big nuisance. I can barely take care of these two kids and my wife. I don't take care of my wife, but deal with things, that are stressful. Older age. I'm going to get a colonoscopy in a month. People, I know you don't want that. I don't blame you. They are not fun. You got to do things to your body before you take the test that you're not going to like. But if you don't do it and you get issues, you'll regret it. Okay, enough health talk, kids talk, wife talk, nobody cares. Move on. Okay, I get the message. I just wanted to veer out of the sphere of music briefly and give you an insight on my life. Okay, speaking of insight, let's get back to the list. Number 248, Ornette Coleman, The Shape of Jazz to Come. You know what, Ornette? I don't know what shape the jazz was that was coming, but I don't know much about jazz, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. I'll just move on. What is this, the third Grateful Dead album on this list today? Number 247, Live Dead. I'm going to guess it's a live album. Wow. How did I figure that one out? So, they drifted around, they toured around, they're still around in some form. I mean, it's whoever owns the name Grateful Dead, they just have to show up with one other Grateful Dead person, and people will show up because obviously Jerry Garcia's been dead 20 years about. So we are not, we're not, it's not quite the Grateful Dead as it was, but I mean, look, they still have the name. There's still a couple of guys around that are in the band, I think. Bob Weir, maybe? I'm not sure. So they trot out the band every once in a while. All these years later, 50-something years. Wow. Here's a guy, number 246, The Mothers of Invention, Freak Out. I did kind of get to know this album because I had a friend that was into avant-garde, kind of off-the-wall music, and he lent me the album like in 1977 or 78. It was kind of off-the-wall, weird stuff. I didn't really understand it much, but I could see the talent behind Frank Zappa's early work. He wasn't looking for hit singles. He wasn't trying to be hip. He wasn't trying to be the Beatles or the Rolling Stones and be commercial. He just wanted to do his music, and he's always done that and had a following. I mean, if the guy did arenas, which he did when he was alive, then he definitely had a decent-sized fan base. He barely got any radio airplay where I live. I mean, other than Valley Girl and Dynamo Hum and maybe the one about the dental floss in Montana, you didn't hear much of Frank Zappa, and he had over 40, 50 albums, so they were not... he was never trying to be commercially acceptable. His only hit, I believe, his top 40 hit was Valley Girls with his daughter, Moon Unit Zappa. Jerry Lee Lewis, all killer, no filler. Well, Jerry Lee somehow is still alive. A hard-drinking guy like that and partying guy, probably did drugs, not sure. Amazingly, is still around. I can't believe the guy would still be touring. He was Elvis's cousin. And I do remember hearing a story that in the at some point he went to Graceland when Elvis was there, or looking for Elvis, and he had a gun in his hand in the driveway of Elvis's mansion. I don't know what it was about, what caused the problem, or what made him do that, but Jerry Lee Lewis, he did show up with the gun. Famous for dating and marrying his 13-year-old cousin. Maybe that inspired R. Kelly. I don't know. Well, R. Kelly, I don't know if he did anything with his relatives, but he certainly liked fans of his a little too much when they were under 18. So that's my Jerry Lee Lewis story. We are in the midst of Eddie G's Music World. Still time. There's still time. Eminem, the Marshall Mathers LP. I'm going to say that was his first one. And if it wasn't, it's not that big a deal. It came out in 2000. So he's the guy that hooked up with Dr. Dre, called him his muse kind of thing, where they kind of merged together. I think Eminem was known more for the words. And Dr. Dre, he once said that he would kind of convey the music that was in his head, and Dr. Dre would portray it in the studio. So they worked together well. He's still around. He still had an album recently out. He still manages to be successful. People revere him, and on he goes. Saw something about his daughter's all grown up. She looks like in her 20s, or early 20s by now. Black Sabbath, their album Black Sabbath. I'm going to guess it's their first album. I believe it came out before Paranoid album, and the album had The Wizard on it, which I do know, and had the original guys, Geezer Butler, Tony Iommi, Bill Ward, and of course Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy is still running around touring. He just turned 70, I believe. Another show that I have to figure out if I want to go to or not, because again, the friend that wants to go with me can't come up with any money. So I got to lay it out for the guy and maybe wait for a long time to get it back. So who knows? I've seen Ozzy solo once. I've seen Ozzy with Black Sabbath once. So I'm on the fence. Run DMC with their album Run DMC at number 242. Rockbox was a song off that. It's Like That. Well known for their teaming up with Aerosmith, which they did for Walk This Way. And they seem to be passing, like Aerosmith doing, they did the Aerosmith song and helped both careers. Aerosmith was kind of a little bit, maybe at the time, less popular because they were kind of in between huge albums. And the fact that our Run DMC collaborated with them, maybe that helped propel them back into the spotlight, and they did a lot of big albums after that. And I know around the mid 80s, when this album with Run DMC came out, they were not as big. There was a little bit of a lull in their career. It was after Night in the Ruts and a few other ones. The Replacements, Let It Be. Okay, so here's a band that's famous for not being famous, in my opinion, because everybody loves them, critically acclaimed. Heard a few songs by them, maybe two. Never really cared much either way. They're not around as far as I know, and this is one of their albums that got critically acclaimed and sold maybe a little bit, but Paul Westerberg is the lead singer of the band and still around, still doing stuff, but never quite capturing the world in a major way. But critically, they're supposed to be great, and maybe I should give them a little bit of a listen. Steely Dan and their album Can't Buy a Thrill. Fagan and Becker were the guys that people think of when they think of Steely Dan. There were other guys like Jeff Skunk Baxter, who went between the Doobie Brothers and Steely Dan back and forth. And they didn't really tour a lot back then. I guess when the money was running low, or maybe there was another reason, I'm not sure. They did start touring. I would say they did a tour in late 2009, 10, 11, 12, something in there. And then Walter Becker passed away about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And Donald Fagen still toured after that. So maybe they managed to come up with enough, come up with the right people to do whatever Becker did, singing, guitars, and everything. I always liked Steely Dan. They were not typical top 40 act. They had a jazzy feel to them, but they turned it into a pop approach and had a great career. Next on the list will be Madonna Like a Prayer. Do I really have to talk about one of the biggest, if not the biggest, pop stars of all time? Not going to say she doesn't deserve this praise. She does. She's got some good songs and really trying to stay popular, and she's older than me, so she must be 60. I remember her on Dick Clark show the first time I saw her. I think it was 1984 or 83. And she still tours. I mean, she can go on tour and clean up. I mean, if she never has a hit again for the rest of her life, and she still has enough strength to get on stage, she'll always find people to fill arenas and go see her. She has nothing to worry about. Next, Howlin' Wolf, Howlin' Wolf. Okay, I'm not going to say much about this because it's not my forte. Blues guy, big popular guy. Maybe he's one of the guys that sued Zeppelin. I don't remember, but a few of these blues guys did. But you don't get the feeling that he was one of these guys that cashed in a big way financially. I was on the Chess label. This came out in 1962. Shake for Me is one of the songs, and The Red Rooster, Backdoor Man. Sounds like the Shake for Me was a line used by Zeppelin. The Red Rooster, I think Rolling Stones had a song called Little Red Rooster. And Backdoor Man, that's a song by the Doors. So they might, I don't think they copied the song, but it sounds like those three songs that I just read off to you certainly were influential to other people. And we're going down to 237. The Who sings My Generation, one of their earlier albums, 1966, with the famous stuttering, My Generation. A great twist on a song they could have done without stuttering, but because they did it with the all of that with Daltrey, it stands out and shows their brilliance. And now, even though they only have two original members, who knows? Maybe I should see them with the orchestra. They're getting kind of old. How many years can you show up and tour? I'm not saying they're coming to my town. They might be. They probably will. They're pretty confident they're going to sell a good 12 to 15,000 tickets. So I'm guessing they will come to Montreal. Jackie Wilson, a big star from the 70s, 60s, 50s R&B. Number 236, Mr. Excitement. He was known for that because he had a great dancing and stage show. Your Love Keeps Lifting Me Higher and Higher was on this. Sadly, he had a stroke. I think it was on stage. It's a pretty sad story for him. And there were allegations of doing something wrong with, I think it was Patti LaBelle, might have claimed that, I won't say what I think she said, but let's just say, not that people who run Jackie Wilson's music are going to listen to my show, but there were allegations between Patti LaBelle and what she said that Jackie Wilson, let's just say, did something he shouldn't have done to her. That's all I have to say about that. Marking down the list, moving down. We're getting close to ending the show. I know it's hard to believe that it will end, but you know what? We're all going to have endings in our lives. And this show, as long as I'm alive and capable of figuring out how to use the buttons, I'll try to do it to keep everybody happy, because I know everybody wants to hear it. Okay, number 235, Patsy Cline. Oh, remember I said that Willie Nelson wrote a song called Crazy for somebody? Because I momentarily forgot who it was. Well, it's Patsy Cline. So she's next on the list with The Ultimate Collection. Walking After Midnight was on this. I Fall to Pieces. and Crazy, of course, as well. And she died, but I don't remember. Was it a plane crash? Yeah, it was. 30 years old. So, oh boy, these singers get on the plane. Buddy Holly too. It's a little scary. I've only been on a plane about 10 times in my life, and I'm not crazy about them. Something about getting up there. I'm not scared of dying. It's going to happen, and I just don't want to be making one with the earth or the water as I get closer to it, or either of them. It just doesn't sound like a way I want to go. And I'm not really going anywhere lately, so I'm probably stuck in the middle with you. Patsy Cline had a great career with those songs and had a nice voice, country style, kind of like a little toned down Brenda Lee. Like no, she's not known for her upbeat songs. Simon and Garfunkel, Bookends from 1968. Full of hits, America, Graduate Theme, Mrs. Robinson, and they produced it themselves. This is news. Wow, that's a lot of work to produce a record. And Simon has toured. Garfunkel has done some shows here and there. Paul Simon has said his touring days are over, but he hasn't ruled out the one-off type of thing or a residency for a few days here and there. So he hasn't ruled it out. Doesn't mean he'll do it. I had a lot of chance to see Paul Simon. Never did. Don't regret it. I wouldn't say I regret it. Because like I've said often, you just can't go to every show. They're hard to get to. They're far. They're costly. You got to spend an hour and a half to get there. Wait around for an hour or two for it to start. Then an hour and a half to get home. Start to think about shows when you get into that stage. Number 233, The Byrds, Mr. Tambourine Man. Bob Dylan, I believe, wrote this song, and folky heavyweights that they were. Great tune. I've heard it here and there, and I know it well. 1965, and you know, back then you couldn't turn on the radio without hearing this song. It was on there on a constant basis, and it still stands the test of time. I've heard it once in a while since then, or every once in a while when I'm on a nostalgic kick, I might listen to it. The Kinks, another band from the same era. The Kink Chronicles. So this is 1972, so a little after their commercial success. This is like a bunch of songs from 66 to 70. Waterloo Sunset is on there. And that was one of the songs when I've mentioned in the past, like 40 minutes ago or so, that they had a period of less commercial success. This is what I mean. Waterloo Sunset. I remember trying to, because I read about it so many times, looked it up, Waterloo Sunset, liked it, but I don't remember it now, and I've never heard it since. Just never got airplay. We're coming close to the end of Eddie G's Music World, counting down the top 500 from Rolling Stones. Queen, A Night at the Opera, they're in the news quite a bit at number 231. Massive push for Queen now because of their album called Bohemian Rhapsody. Rami Malek plays Freddie Mercury, and other people play the other guys. And I hear it's a very positive album, a positive movie about them. They had a hand in writing it, meaning they kind of had critical ability to discuss and to decide the flow of the movie. Meaning, if the guy who wrote the movie said, I want to make it about AIDS and negative stuff that happened and all this stuff, they didn't want Freddie Mercury portrayed in a negative light, meaning showing him go through the throes of dying and all that. So I haven't seen the movie, and I've heard that that's what happened. And I have seen the band with What Have You Done For Me? What's that guy's name? Anyway, not Freddie Mercury. It's the latest guy that sings with them. Can't remember his name. Adam Lambert. Just remembered. Okay, next 230. Bonnie Raitt and her album Nick of Time. This is the one that in 1989 won all of the awards, like in the Grammys, like tons, not all, but tons. And I knew who she was. I'd heard about her in a country field, and I knew her name. I guess something to talk about crossed her into the pop world more. And there she was winning all these Grammys. So good for her that she got all this acclaim. Sadly, I haven't watched the Grammys lately because it's so many rappers and hip hoppers running around doing stuff that I'm not into, getting all these awards and performing. And I don't want to hear Cardi B and Future and all these rappers and Common and Kanye and Drake. And it's not really my thing. And I know they pretty much flood those shows. And then there's maybe a band like Imagine Dragons, which is a decent band, but just to stay up late on a Sunday night to watch Grammys now, it doesn't really do it for me. I'll listen to talk shows or something else, but not too much of the award shows anymore. Let's see. We'll get to one more. 229, Aerosmith, and their album Toys in the Attic. This is 1975. I saw them 1977. They toured and they had Rick Derringer open for them. This album had Walk This Way, which I just mentioned was part of the collaboration with Run DMC from the 80s. And, well, not much to say about these guys. They're well known. They're still around. There's talk of a reunion tour, but you know how these guys, Joe Perry and Steve Tyler, are. They're not never, but often they disagree on future plans for the band. You know, heard Tyler say it's a farewell tour, and Perry had said, "Well, let's see. We don't know." And you know, Joe Perry's had 2 incidents of health issues in the last 3-4 years. He was playing with a band called Something Vampires with Alice Cooper and a couple of other, Johnny Depp in it. And I think he collapsed, and then he did some other show in the last 6 months and collapsed again. So I hope he's okay. He's a talented guy, and not sure what's going on with his health. But in reality, I think it's okay to say that they're on the list of potential shows that I would see because Aerosmith has had a great career. I have seen them twice and was thrilled to death when I did touch fingers with Steve Tyler and did not take his rings off his finger as much as it was tempting. So that's it for the edition of Eddie G's Music World. First time on webcam. Happy to say. I hope everything went well because I'm also using a newfangled microphone headset thing. And let's see how things go. We don't know what will happen next week, the week after. We'll try to find some interesting things to discuss. I do my best. Maybe there'll be another collaboration with another musician. Maybe I'll talk to other talk show hosts. I will find something to do. And either way, I'm going to have my list to talk about. And we'll see you next week, Eddie G's Music World, for another week. Thank you for seeing me and listening to me. And if you have any comments, negative or positive about the show or suggestions, or somebody wants to, somebody who would like to do an interview, I'll be happy to try to do that. Thank you very much. See you next week.